That morning felt almost soft. My grandchild Max drew me a picture, me with flowers in my hair. We ate together in the kitchen. My son Ethan scrolled his phone, his wife Tara fed Max blueberries one by one, and I just existed, quietly in the corner of their morning. I thought, I was doing okay today. Until after breakfast I was rinsing plates when Ethan came up beside me. He didn't look at me, just spoke, casual as weather. Mom, my wife and I talked. We really think it's time you start figuring out your next steps. Something more permanent. I blinked. Permanent? Then he added, offhand like it meant nothing. I mean, if you wanted comfort, you should have stayed married to Dad. The silence that followed was louder than any argument. I nodded, but my hand clenched around the plate I'd just dried. I couldn't feel my fingers. Comfort? Is that what this was about? Did they think survival was a luxury? My name is Maggie Quinn. I'm 63, divorced. I live in the finished basement of my son's house in upstate New York. That day, I realized, they didn't just want me gone today. They've been ready for a long time. Today, they finally said it out loud. Sorry, he continued half-heartedly. I didn't mean that to sound harsh. But his words made something inside me crack. You didn't? I asked, my voice calm but cold. I set the plate down and wiped my hands on the towel. Because it landed just fine. Ethan sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose like he was the one exhausted by this exchange. Look, I'm not trying to be the bad guy here, it's just, Tara and I have a system. Max's schedule is tight. We're barely holding it together. Their system. Of course, I used to have a system too. It was called 3 jobs, a mortgage, and a marriage to a man who snored through my exhaustion. Ethan went on. You know, we've appreciated you being here. But it's been 3 months. Tara's family is asking when we're going to get back the guest room. Max misses his play area downstairs. You get it, right? Play area. That same basement where I kept my toiletries in a shoebox and prayed the dehumidifier wouldn't short-circuit while I was asleep. I didn't realize my presence was so disruptive, I said. Ethan straightened. That's not fair, isn't it? I just think you should be thinking about next steps. A long-term solution. Maybe some kind of senior living community. Dad mentioned Florida. That condo. My hand tightened around the dish towel. Ah, yes, Florida. The one-bedroom exile with white walls and his mistress's toothbrush in the holder. How thoughtful of him. He looked away. Then I said it, not because I wanted to hurt him, but because I wanted to hear how it sounded in the air. Tell me, Ethan. If comfort is the reward for staying married, what exactly do I get for surviving it? That hit harder than I expected. He opened his mouth. Mum, don't twist this into... I'm not twisting anything, I said, softer now. I'm just trying to understand the rules. Your house has many after all. He took a step back. This isn't about rules. It's about boundaries. That word. Again, I smiled. Boundaries, I repeated. Of course. Like the invisible lines I wasn't supposed to cross, the fridge drawer labelled Tara's produce, the TV remote I wasn't trusted with, the stairs I learned to tiptoe on. Ethan cleared his throat. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Number, he was wrong. What he didn't know was I'd already stopped making it complicated. I'd stopped resisting, stopped asking, stopped hoping they'd suddenly see me not as a burden, but as someone who'd once been everything. The mother who worked late shifts so he could have braces. The woman who sat beside his bed when he had mono for 2 weeks straight. The same hands that bandaged his knees now dried dishes in a house where even her footsteps felt like an intrusion. I spoke. Thank you, Ethan, for your honesty. It helps. He shifted. So, we're good. I turned off the light. Good night, sweetheart, I said, and walked back to the basement. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. Something in me has changed. It didn't just stop there. Next morning, Tara opened the door and handed me Max. Can you watch him for a bit? No, please. No warning. Just handed him over and left. That night at dinner, I said, Next time I'm asleep, I'd appreciate it if you asked first. Ethan set down his fork. Mum, maybe you're overthinking. See? If you wanted comfort, you should have stayed married to Dad. He said that again. I didn't respond right away. Like a truth they believed. Like a sentence passed. I washed my plate, dried my hands, and said nothing. He walked away. No apology. Back in the basement, it had no window, no light, no privacy. Just a futon, a damp floor, and a pipe that never stopped dripping. I sat on the edge of the bed, didn't cry, didn't sleep. Just sat there thinking, I gave 28 years to a man who didn't love me back. Now I'm giving silence to a son who doesn't see me. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe it's time I should live for myself. It started with a box. I wasn't looking for anything. Just couldn't sleep. Again. The hum of the fridge upstairs, the light footsteps of Max in the hallway above, the familiar ache in my back from the futon. I opened a bin I hadn't touched since the divorce. Old sweaters, a broken umbrella, and a pair of reading glasses I thought I lost 2 years ago. And under all that, wrapped in a wool scarf, my old camera. I didn't even remember packing it. It was heavier than I remembered. Dusty, cold but intact. The battery still held a charge. The next morning I walked. Not far, just around the neighbourhood. Not for exercise, not to run errands, just to see. I photographed a cat, curled up on a sun-warmed car hood. A dandelion pushing up through cracked pavement. A man asleep on a bench, arms folded over a grocery bag. They weren't beautiful photos, but they were honest. And they were mine. I started going out every morning, camera in hand, 10, maybe 15 minutes. Just enough light, just enough air. I set up a blog. No name, no face, just photos and a line or two. This one reminded me that things grow even when they shouldn't. To my surprise, people found it. Comments trickled in. Thank you for this. I needed this today. Where is this taken? And then, one day, an email. A small gallery downtown. They were curating a show called Ordinary Grace. They asked if I'd like to contribute. I read the message twice, then a third time. I didn't reply right away, not because I didn't want to, but because I did. And that felt new. I didn't tell Ethan, not because I was hiding, but, for the first time in a long time, I had something that was just mine. Just Maggie, not Mom, not guest, not a burden, just me. Looking, framing, choosing what to keep and what to let go. The gallery sent a small advance. Enough for the first month's rent and a deposit. I found a studio 10 blocks away. Old floors, thin walls, but sunlight poured in through 2 big windows. And no one told me when to go to sleep. I left a letter on the kitchen counter. Dear Ethan, I didn't leave to punish you. That's probably the first thing I want you to know. I left because I couldn't hear myself think anymore. Because I forgot what my own breath sounded like when it wasn't being held in. Because I was slowly becoming a version of myself I didn't recognize. Quiet in all the wrong ways. You didn't mean to hurt me, but sometimes harm comes from what we don't say, what we don't notice, what we assume someone else will just accept. I know you're under pressure. I know life is heavy. But for a while there, you stopped seeing me. Not as your mother, just as a human being. I was the extra plate at dinner, the forgotten voice, the body that folded laundry and kept quiet when sleep was short and tempers were shorter. And maybe you thought that's just what mothers do. But here's the truth. I was a person long before I was a mother. I had dreams, flaws, talents, and stubborn joy. And somewhere between school pickups and making sure you had clean socks, I shelved all that. Willingly, lovingly. I don't regret that. What I do regret is forgetting I was allowed to exist outside of usefulness. Leaving your house wasn't dramatic. It wasn't even sad. It was like coming up for air. Now I have a small space, it's not much. But the light hits just right in the mornings. And a stray cat sits by my window like she's guarding something sacred. I take photos again. I teach others how to see what's been overlooked. And for the first time in years, I don't feel like a burden. I feel like a person. Whole. Not waiting for someone else to give me permission. Ethan, I love you. That's never been in question. But love without respect becomes an obligation. And I won't live under that roof again. Not metaphorically, not literally. If you want to find me, you can. But not as someone who needs a place to stay. As someone who finally knows how to stand. With love, Mom. It had been almost 4 months since I left. I hadn't heard from my son Ethan. No calls, no texts. Not even a question about where I'd gone. I didn't expect one. In his world, I had simply faded out. But life, as it tends to, kept moving. Until one day, it didn't. First came the layoffs. His company folded a whole department. Ethan's name landed on a spreadsheet he wasn't supposed to see. He didn't tell his wife Tara. Not right away. He still left the house each morning, collared shirt ironed, laptop bag in hand. But he spent his days in the back of a library staring at job boards like they were blank walls. Tara noticed. Of course she did. Bills stacked. Credit cards froze. Max needed new shoes. Then came the fight. Not screaming, just stillness, cold and final. She packed a small suitcase, said she was taking Max somewhere stable. But 2 days later, she dropped Max back off with Ethan. And left. For real this time. No note, no return date. Just Ethan. And Max. And a house with too many rooms and no noise in any of them. Ethan didn't break down, maybe. But he did forget how to sleep. How to cook. How to ask for help. Until one morning after 3 job rejections in a single week, he opened the fridge, found a half-eaten sandwich and 1 wrinkled apple and said, not to anyone, just to the silence, I don't know what I'm doing. The rent notice came on a Thursday. He had 2 weeks to vacate. No job, no savings. No one left to call except me. When he showed up, he didn't knock right away. He stood at the bottom of the steps to my studio, Max beside him, clutching a backpack and a worn-out teddy bear. I opened the door before he reached for the bell. Ethan looked thinner, hair unkempt, shirt wrinkled, dark circles under his eyes. He wasn't the man who once told me I should have stayed married for comfort. He was someone trying to keep himself upright. Hi, Mom, he said, voice low. I didn't know where else to go. I didn't ask questions, I didn't offer hugs. I just looked at him. Really looked. Then I stepped aside and said simply, you can stay. But this isn't your house. This is my studio. My space. He nodded, eyes down. And that means, I added, you'll need to help. Do your part. Everyone pulls their weight here. He nodded again. Inside, I pointed toward the folded futon in the corner. Same one I used to sleep on. Same sag in the middle. You and Max will sleep there, I said. It's tight, but it's warm. And it's enough, for now. He didn't argue, didn't complain. Just bent down to unzip Max's backpack and started settling in. Quiet, careful. And I thought, maybe now you understand what it means to ask for space in a place where none was offered. It was nearly dusk when I heard the knock. 3 slow taps. Hesitant. I opened the door to find Ethan standing there with Max half asleep in his arms. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, but in the way someone shrinks when life stops going their way. Hey, he said, voice low. Can we come in? I looked past him. The car behind him was crammed with boxes. A blanket was tossed over Max's car seat. Nothing packed with care. Just survival. Is this all of it? I asked. He nodded. Yeah, we lost the place. I stepped aside. Inside, the studio smelled like strong coffee and cinnamon, left over from a community workshop earlier. The windows were fogged with cold. Ethan put Max down gently on the futon in the corner, the same one I used to sleep on. He looked around, then turned to me. Mum, I know this is a lot to ask, but just for a while, until I figure things out. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I walked to the small table near the window, picked up my mug, and took a sip. Let the silence stretch. Not out of cruelty, but because it was the first time he had to sit in it. Then I said, "This isn't your house, Ethan. This is my studio, my life. You're welcome, for now, but on my terms." He nodded too quickly. "Of course, I'll keep the place clean, I'll find work, I just need—" I cut him off. "You need to understand. Everyone here contributes. No guests, no exemptions. You work, you help, you earn your space." His mouth opened like he wanted to push back. But he saw something in my face, maybe the line he'd crossed once and never apologized for. "I just didn't know where else to go," he said, softer now. "I didn't think I'd end up here." I looked at him. Really looked. His jaw trembled slightly, not from cold, from exhaustion, from being forced to admit he didn't have the answers. And inside me something stirred. Old, heavy, but finally, still. "So this is what it took," I thought, "for you to see me not as your backup plan, but as someone who survived the version of life you now find unbearable." I didn't say that out loud. Instead, I walked over, pulled the extra blanket from the shelf, and handed it to him. "You'll sleep where I slept," I said. "The futon, the cold draft by the window. Max can take the inside. You take the edge." He took the blanket with both hands. His eyes didn't meet mine. I almost reached out to touch his shoulder. Almost. But I stopped myself. Because this moment right here, wasn't for comforting. It was for remembering. Love doesn't mean forgetting. It means forgiving with your eyes open. "Thanks, Mom," he whispered. I nodded. "Get some rest. We start early." "Start what?" I turned toward the small whiteboard near the door. Feeding schedules, chore rotations, volunteer shifts. "New life," I said simply. "You're part of it now." The next morning, Ethan woke to the sound of a broom sweeping across the hardwood floor. Max was still asleep, curled against the wall, breathing slowly. Ethan sat up slowly, his back stiff from the futon. The same sag I had slept in for months now greeted him like an old lesson. I handed him a mug of instant coffee. No sugar, no cream. "Drink. Then meet me outside," I said. He followed, still rubbing sleep from his eyes. The backyard behind the studio wasn't much, but it held a few raised garden beds, a compost bin, and a shed full of supplies for the workshops I ran. I pointed to a bucket of tools. "We're fixing the fence today." He blinked. "What fence?" "The one you walked past last night without noticing." To his credit, he didn't argue. We worked in silence. I gave him the harder tasks, digging out roots, hammering slats back into place. He struggled. His hands, once used to keyboards, blistered quickly. But he didn't quit. At noon, we paused for water. He sat on the steps, wiping sweat from his brow. "You really do all this every day?" he asked. I nodded. "Some days more, some days less. But yes, I work." He was quiet for a moment. Then, without looking at me, he said, "I didn't realize." I let him trail off. He didn't need to finish the sentence. That was the beginning. Over the next few days, he folded into the rhythm of the place. Helped with deliveries, cleaned after workshops, cooked once, burned the rice but tried again. Max adjusted quickly. He sat beside me during photo sessions, asking questions about lighting and shadows. Sometimes he'd curl up beside Olive, the stray cat, and whisper stories to her. Ethan began to watch more than he spoke. He watched how people here respected me, how they listened when I taught, how they smiled when I spoke. And for the first time in his life, he started to see me as someone not just worth helping, but it's worth learning from. It started with a quiet question. Ethan and I were having coffee after cleaning the studio. Max was curled up in a corner drawing cats on scrap paper. The afternoon sun stretched long across the floor. Ethan shifted in his seat and cleared his throat. "Would it be okay if I helped design the next exhibit?" I looked at him. Not the words. Him. Not the man who once ignored me on his couch. Not the voice that said, "If you wanted comfort, you should have stayed married." This was someone else. Someone slower, calmer, finally listening. I nodded. We could use a fresh eye. He got to work, sketched layouts, fixed captions, and rewired the old track lights. He was good at it, organised, steady, no longer needing credit, just presence. Then, Tara called. She wanted to take Max back, said things were better now. Ethan didn't tell me right away, but I heard him on the porch that night talking low. He's settled here. He sleeps well. He's learning things. I'm not ready to undo that yet. Not defiant, not angry, just dead clear. That's when I knew. He wasn't apologizing with words. He was showing it. In every early morning, every folded chair, every time he stayed when it got hard. The exhibit came quickly. The studio transformed. White linens, photo prints, handmade signage. Guests trickled in, neighbours, strangers, curious eyes and quiet hands. Ethan stood by the door, greeting each person with a calm I hadn't seen in years. Max ran around handing out flyers, beaming under his crooked name tag. I stood still watching the life I had built, now ours. After the last guest left, Ethan handed me a small envelope. "Just something I wrote," he said. "You don't have to read it now." I held it, didn't open it. Instead, I looked at him. "Apologies are nice," I said, "but I'm more interested in the man you're becoming than the man you used to be." He nodded, quietly, gratefully. Then Max tugged my sleeve. "Let's take a photo, all of us." We stood together. 3 generations. I didn't fix my hair. Ethan didn't hide his tired eyes. Max smiled like he didn't know the world could ever break. The camera clicked. We printed it the next morning and hung it above the studio door. Below it I wrote, "Comfort isn't something we inherit. It's something we earn, together." So, that's how the story ends. If this made you think, or if you've lived through something similar, share your thoughts in the comments. Our channel is a space for sharing tales of the elderly and family revenge stories from people who have weathered life's storms. Subscribe to the channel for more, because sometimes the deepest form of revenge is simply living on your own terms.